All right, yeah. So something else I wanted to look at, chat, was this video I saw earlier. It's called "Why Geometry Dash Hasn't Died." Let's go ahead and take a look at it.
Geometry.
Well, because as you know, the game has been popping again. What are Steam charts looking like? Steam charts, Geometry Dash. Yeah. I mean, look at this. The game came out so long ago. Look at this. 2015. It came out in 2015. And you know, it's grown steadily, and that makes sense, right? It's grown steadily. But throughout that time period, it never had a major increase until what? This was probably 2.2, right? When 2.2 released. This was the first time it had a huge fucking spike. And of course it dropped back down after, as games do. And recently, I mean, I saw this on Twitter, bro. Is this not fucking... What happened? What changed? You would expect something like 2.3 to release. This wasn't with, like, Jinxie or anything else. Like, it almost looks botted, even though it isn't. It looks that way. Because this is wild. It went from 38,000 to 107. 108. That is a big number. Big number. Oh, let's go. Let's look at what this guy has to say. Why Geometry Dash is still growing.
Geometry Dash released in 2013, yet somehow, 13 years later, the game is more popular than ever. That's strange, isn't it? Most games follow a pretty predictable life cycle. They launch, explode in popularity for a while, and then slowly fade away. But GD clearly didn't follow that pattern. So instead of looking at it like a normal game,
Here is one of my theories. Just no base information, no real reasoning to this, but I think a large reason that the game has done as well as it has over the time period over the past few years, and just in general, is the community. The game is so heavily community based that without the creator section and whatnot, the game wouldn't be anything. The game would have died off very quickly. It wouldn't have not died off, but it would have followed the trend he was talking about. Last a few years and crash. The other aspect of that is with the community. It's not just the creator tab. The way the community intertwines together is so... What's the word I'm looking for? It's there. Everyone does everything together. It's like everything. People show support. Let me give you an example. On Apex Legends, this is the game I used to play. Apex Legends, I used to post on Reddit, and they have all these strict rules regarding everything. On Geometry Dash, you can post whatever the fuck you want. You can put your link in. People support creators on this game, and they support other players. It's not like that on other games.
the life cycle of most games tends to follow a similar pattern. A game launches.
Oh, sorry. Last thing, because also the skill gap. With the constant increase in the skill gap, that is another reason.
Sees a surge of popularity, and a core community forms around it. But that attention isn't permanent. Over time, people begin to run out of things to talk about. One of the biggest reasons for this is because people run out of content to talk about. In most games, every new level, mechanic, you name it, has to come directly from the developers. That means the supply of content is limited by something very simple: time. And players consume content much faster than developers can produce it. This often creates the feeling of a waiting period where developers work on new updates that can create a pretty sizable amount of unrest over time. And it doesn't help in the current gaming climate where, for lack of a better term, the attention economy makes this cycle even faster. Thousands of games are released every
Just want to say, peak Hollow Knight music, a phenomenal choice.
year, all competing for a finite amount of players. Social media amplifies this even further, constantly shifting attention towards whatever game is trending at the moment. Once a game stops appearing in the upper echelon, its visibility drops quickly, and this drop is often very steep. Most games also heavily rely on their launch window to generate that attention. Marketing campaigns, trailers, and influencer sponsorships create a huge spike of visibility when a game first releases. But once that momentum fades, maintaining the same level of exposure becomes much harder. Eventually, newer competitors arrive offering similar experiences, but with the advantage of novelty at their disposal. In other words, most games eventually decline because they run out of content.
So lack of content, but because Jump Trash constantly has this influx of people creating new levels and just spending time working on that, it doesn't have that issue.
Or attention, or in some cases both. If you were to look at the life cycle of most games, you'd
I-
find this in about
I think another reason for that is the editor is so complex to the point where it's practically a game engine. So you have so many mini developers working on the game or on their levels that it's an infinite influx of content.
99% of cases. But GD somehow avoided that cycle entirely. Why? The answer starts with something that most games never fully achieve: a perfectly segmented audience. Even I don't have one. Around 92% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So if you enjoy these type of breakdowns, feel free to help change that.
That was smooth. And if you're enjoying this reaction or want to see any of my new videos, if you want to see me watch anything like this again, go ahead. It's right below the video. Like, subscribe.
Segmentation is a marketing term that refers to dividing a product's audience into groups based on different motivations, behaviors, or interests. Most games primarily appeal to one dominant player type, but GD is unusual because it supports several different types of players at the same time, and each of these groups plays an instrumental role in keeping the game healthy. The first group is the casual player base. These are the players that interact with GD the way most people interact with any game. They download it, play through the official levels, maybe try a few community levels, and then move on with their lives like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, so we got the casuals, we got the the people that play a shit ton, we got the creators. I guess that you could divide the people who play a shit ton to people who grind out stars and other things. Hold on. Grind out stars and other things to as well, and then the pro, quote unquote pro players or whatever, right?
On its own, this group behaves exactly how you'd expect in normal circumstances. They arrive during periods of attention, and many eventually leave once the novelty fades. But GD doesn't rely on this group alone, because who do you think are the ones creating these things? The second group, and arguably the most important, is the level creators. GD has an editor which allows players to design and publish their own levels, which means the
Some of the shit in this game that's designed is just pure art. I will say that, bro. Crazy
game's
stuff.
responsibility for producing content is no longer limited to the developer. Instead, it becomes distributed across the entire community. Thousands of creators build new levels, mechanics, and ideas to share with other players. In other words, the community essentially takes on RobTop's job of producing content. You hear that, guys? We've basically signed ourselves up to do the work for a guy who won't update our game for over 2,000 days. But even that isn't the full picture of producing content.
It's my goat, RobTop, bro. Living on that farm, updating the game every once a millennia. I don't think anyone can do it better than my goat.
You hear that, guys? 1,000 days. But even that isn't the full picture, because there's another group that expands this even further: competitive players. GD is technically a
I got 3 out of 3 right so far.
single-player game, but the community has built its own competitive structures around it, and even a multiplayer feature through modding. The main point here is that players will attempt levels so difficult that they can take tens of thousands of attempts to complete, which creates their own individual narratives to follow. The Demon List adds an entirely new layer of engagement that would otherwise be a massive exclusion for a game like this. If creators are the ones that create the content, then the competitive players are the consumers, who push the content to its absolute limits. And then there's the fourth group, which ties all of these together: YouTubers, streamers,
I did not get that one right. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that. Wow. So maybe there's 5 groups, and I got 3.
content creators alike. The people that take GD's content and turn it into video content. Extreme demon completions, challenge videos, and long stories continuously introduce the game to new audiences. And because the community constantly produces new levels, there is always something new to feature, which creates an interesting loop. Creators build the levels, players push them to their limits, content creators broadcast these achievements to millions of viewers. And some of those viewers eventually become the next generation of players, the next creators, the next pro players, the next content creators, which creates an interesting dynamic. When you step back and look at these four groups together, something interesting starts to appear, something that more so resembles a loop. But the actual technical term for this exact scenario is known as a flywheel. A flywheel is
I feel like there's a different term. It's like there's a term with effect. There's I can't think of it right now. And then there's a term with the word cycle in it, and I can't think of either right now. I'm tired of shit, but it's there. It's there.
Loop where each part of a system strengthens the next, allowing the entire structure to snowball over time. And this here is what GD's flywheel looks like. This single idea explains almost everything about how the game survives. The result is a system where the community continuously generates the very content that keeps the game alive. But that still leaves one important question. Why GD specifically? Plenty of games have level editors. Plenty of games have competitive communities.
The music, that's it. That's gotta be it, right?
Plenty of games have strong YouTube presences. Yet very few manage to hold and even grow their attention over a decade. And that brings us to the next part of the equation. Product positioning. Product positioning refers to how a product differentiates itself within a market. Or, put more
You're getting into the technical terms, bro. I guess it wasn't the fucking music. Just say it wasn't the music.
In this context, why would someone choose this game instead of something else? And GD's positioning is actually built around a surprisingly clever psychological design. When a new player launches the game for the first time, the very first level they encounter is Stereo Madness. And if you've played the game, you'll know that it's not very difficult. Within just a few minutes, most players are able to beat it. That early success creates an immediate sense of progress. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the mechanics, the player feels capable, like, okay, I can actually do this. And that moment is incredibly important, because a lot of games make the exact opposite mistake. They front load difficulty. Players fail over and over again, get frustrated, and sometimes quit.
I feel like nowadays this is really commonplace. I feel like, 15 years, was it 2013 this came out? 2014. I feel like that was not commonplace. It just wasn't an understood aspect of making a video game,
Quit before they even understand what the game is trying to do. Geometry Dash takes a completely different approach. It builds confidence first. Once you beat Stereo Madness, the next level is a little harder. Then the next one introduces jump rings, and then you go upside down, and before you know it, you're beating levels that honestly would have looked insurmountable when you first opened the game. Each official level increases the difficulty a little bit, but never so abruptly that the player feels completely lost. Well, for the most part. Instead, it feels like you're climbing a ladder where every step up.
I feel like that would be more like, for a new player, Electroman, no? Glutterfunk? Really? That's the difficult one?
But eventually, players will discover the truth that the difficulty ceiling of the game is basically limitless. The same game that lets a brand new player win within minutes also contains levels that can take experienced players hundreds of hours to beat. And that creates a powerful position in the gaming market. Geometry Dash ends up being easy to start, rewarding to improve at, but almost impossible to fully master. That combination is extremely powerful, because it allows the game to support players at every skill level. New players can enjoy the early levels, casual players can start chasing demons and harder challenges, and the most dedicated players push the game to its absolute limits. And this is where the loop that we talked about earlier starts to connect. That massive skill ceiling is what allows the competitive scene to exist, and the hardest levels are exactly the kind of content that spreads across YouTube and streaming platforms. This balance between accessibility and depth is a huge reason the game has managed to survive for so long, because every player starts in the same place, but where they go from there is almost unlimited. But if this design is so effective, it raises yet another question. Why hasn't another game taken its place already? After all, Geometry Dash
It's gotta be the music. It's gotta be the music.
isn't the only rhythm game, and it's definitely not the only rhythm game with a level editor. Yet somehow it's remained the dominant game in its niche for 13 years. To understand why, we have to look at the competition. because Geometry Dash, like a bunch of other games, started out as a competitor itself. Before GD, there was the Impossible game.
Are you telling me it's not the fucking music?
And if you take
I
one
will.
look at it, the inspiration becomes very
Like,
obvious.
bro.
The same cube, the same spike obstacles, even the same questionable physics.
Swish cheese, God!
The Impossible game was one of the earliest rhythm platformers to gain serious popularity online. It spread quickly across YouTube, and for a while, it was the real deal. But despite that early success, the game faded away. And when you compare it to GD, it's very easy to understand why. The Impossible game ran into almost every problem we talked about earlier. There was no level editor.
I know GD came after, but it looks like a GD ripoff, bro.
The content was finite. Updates were rare or non-existent. And the difficulty was heavily front-loaded, which made it harder for new players to stick with the game. On top of all of that, there lacked an in-game feature to record your completions, whereas GD had every play support way back in the day. Very quickly, players just ran out of things to do. I mean, there's not even half a dozen levels. And once that happened, attention moved elsewhere. Geometry Dash, on the other hand, solved all of these problems. By introducing the editor, the game effectively created an infinite supply of content. Instead of relying on just a single developer, the entire community becomes the developer. Eventually,
That's what I was saying. I was right.
the Impossible Games developer recognized this and tried to address some of these issues in a sequel, but by then, it was simply too late. GD had already captured the audience and established something close to a monopoly within that niche, and the sequel ultimately
So it basically went from GD being a follow-up copy of the Impossible game to the Impossible game sequel being a copy of GD. I get
had
it.
a fate very similar to the original, which is honestly a shame. I actually enjoyed checking it out. But direct competitors are only part of the picture, because competition doesn't always come from games that look exactly the same. Sometimes it comes from completely different categories. If we zoom out a little bit and look at the broader market, there are actually several different types of games that could theoretically compete with GD. The first category being other rhythm games. Games like Osu, Adify, and Friday Night Funkin' all focus on rhythm-based games.
I don't know that one.
But most of these games lack the same level of creative freedom. Players might be able to play new songs or beat
Yeah, like when I was looking at Osu, the big problem I noticed is that it's limited in freedom, creative freedom. Like GD's level creator is practically a game engine, or and you look at Osu and every level is just the same with different speeds and music and different placements on the the circles. Like, it's awesome. It's got a really fucking high skill gap. It's just limited.
maps, but they usually can't build entirely new experiences the way GD creators can.
That's
So while they
yeah.
succeed as rhythm games, they don't develop the same kind of content loop. The second category is other platformers, often featuring their own level editors. Games like Super Mario Maker, or even Celeste to an extent, allow players to design their own levels.
Gonna be honest, I think when I was younger, I watched a little Super Mario Maker content, but I don't know much about either, other than Celeste being a really hard platformer.
But these tools often come with a steeper learning curve. Creating a good level in those games can take quite a bit of time and effort. That said, GD levels sometimes take years to come out, so maybe it's not so much of an issue after all. But GD's case hits a very unusual balance. Its editor is powerful enough to create monstrosities, but simple enough that almost anyone can experiment with it. And that
That's fair.
accessibility dramatically increases the number of potential creators inside the community. The third category is the mobile game market itself. Most mobile games are designed around relatively short lifespans. They rely on aggressive monetization and constant marketing just to stay visible. But GD
Dude, you cannot. I think the last time I downloaded a mobile game was probably a year ago. Some family reunion. You can't play the game without getting absolutely bombarded, completely attacked by every single Rise of Kingdom ad, or fucking, the ads where it's the guy with the gun and he's purposely failing to make you mad so that you download it's like rage bait advertising to get you to install the game, and it's awful.
was released early enough to establish a presence before this climate truly began to take shape. It has the accessibility of a mobile game, but it's not necessarily overloading your senses trying to get you to play it, which means it can survive in an environment
It's a mobile game, but it's not a mobile game.
where most mobile games burn out fairly quickly.
And the same thing as Minecraft. Minecraft is it was a mobile game. It's a mobile game now, but it isn't a mobile game.
Isn't that special? It's a rhythm game, a creative platform, a competitive challenge, and a YouTube-friendly spectacle, all inside one product. And that combination makes it incredibly difficult for another game to replace. Because to truly compete with it, a new game wouldn't just need to copy one of these elements, it would need to recreate the entire premise. And that's a problem nobody's been able to solve for over a decade. Even today, Geometry Dash still ranks among the top 3 paid apps on both the App Store and Google Play, only being beaten by Minecraft, which is, the very game that has defined this generation. And if the few dollars to buy the game is too much, allow me to introduce to you Geometry Dash Lite.
Oh, true. Oh, dude, that's why with so many children on this game, it's still so big. Even with all the 12, 13-year-olds on this game. Because it's accessible, even though it's paid.
Meltdown, World, and Sub-Zero. 4 different free versions of the game, each with their own levels and themes. And together, they act as a massive funnel, constantly bringing new players into the cycle. But there is one major contributor to this funnel that has received a very mixed reception in the community, but it's impossible to ignore. Shorts. Since around 2020, platforms like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram Reels have completely changed how people consume content online. Instead of watching longer videos, many users now spend their time scrolling through endless, fast-paced clips that aim to grab your attention instantly. And that's fascinating, because GD is almost perfectly designed for this environment.
I feel like, yeah, no, dude, I hate GD short form content, because 90% of what comes up on my page is low quality slop. It's fucking 12-year-old brain rot, fucking Israel circles, bro. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Levels are extremely easy to understand visually. Even someone who's never played the game can immediately see what's happening on screen. You've got a cube, spikes to avoid, and if the player dies, it's very
Can't forget Epstein circles. My bad.
Easily telegraphed to the viewer. There's no complicated rule set to explain, no tutorial needed. The premise is clear within seconds, and that clarity makes GD incredibly effective in these shorts. However, there's another advantage. It's not only easy to make out, but it's also visually recognizable. The bright colors, simple shapes, and especially the blue background present in many videos makes it instantly recognizable. Even when someone is scrolling quickly through a feed, the game stands out almost immediately. And recognition is incredibly important on short-form platforms, where viewers decide within 1 to 2 seconds whether to stop their scrolling and give it a watch.
This is one of the first games to utilize oversaturation to the absolute max.
Another interesting feature is because GD is a rhythm game, its music flexibility is second to none. Because creators can choose their own songs, GD clips can easily follow broader music trends. Even if some of these songs are just straight up brain rot, it allows the game to feel like it's integrating with Gen Alpha. And on a related note, GD presents itself as rather kid-friendly. There's no graphic content or violence unless you count the cube violently exploding every 3 seconds. So not many parents
I feel like there's definitely people that throw that rule out the
are going to go out of their way to prevent their kids from trying it out in the first place. And when you combine all of that together, the result is a very effective recipe for viral content. Simple visuals, recognizable gameplay, adaptive music, and a kid-friendly impression.
Dude, the fucking skeleton, God, what's the name of the level again? The music in the background is making me think of the kids, or the people that have been doing that trend with their mouth open.
It's no wonder why short-form GD content has grown so quickly since its introduction. In fact, I've experienced this firsthand. One of my own shorts ended up reaching over 8 million views, something that I didn't even think was remotely possible. And I'm certain that I'm not the only one who's had something like this happen to them. However, like we've said, this rapid growth hasn't come.
I had a video on my second channel get 30K. Is that good?
Without its fair share of pushback. This form of content has been heavily scrutinized, especially by the longer tenured community members, many of which have expressed frustration or disappointment with the rise of short-form content. In their perspective, these clips can feel repetitive, low effort, sometimes just straight up AI generated, or they're just simply disconnected from the deeper creative side of the game, which has created a noticeable divide between newer audiences and the established veterans who grew up with a very different version of the community. But regardless of how you feel about this type of content, and even to an extent, the high energy streamers who cater towards these newer audiences, the impact is absolutely undeniable, because it introduced the game to an entirely new generation of players. And thanks to that loop we discussed earlier, the creators, the competitive players, and the content creators, those players have an even bigger world waiting for them to explore. Which means that even more than a decade after its release, GD is tapping into new audiences. So when you look at the full picture, GD's longevity suddenly becomes a lot easier to explain. Most games struggle with the three core problems. They run out of content, they lose attention, and they get replaced by competitors. But GD itself quietly solved all three. The editor turned the community into a content engine. The hardest levels create long-term payoffs for the most dedicated players. And YouTubers turn those challenges into entertainment that spreads across the internet. And now, short-form video is introducing the game to an entirely new generation of players. All of these pieces connect to form something much bigger than a normal game lifecycle. They form a system, a self-sustaining one where the community continuously creates the very content that keeps the game alive. And that's why Geometry Dash is hitting record player counts 13 years after its original release. And as long as that system keeps spinning, Geometry Dash might not be dying anytime soon.
Damn. That's a good ass video. I can't lie. I don't. Did he explain what happened on this day? This doesn't. Feel like this logically just doesn't make sense though. If there's no update, I don't know. That's kind of wild. There had to been an update that day, right? Maybe I missed something. I don't know. All right. Anyway, next.